And now, for the week of November 7th, Photoshop TV is on the air.
Welcome to Photoshop TV from the National Association of Photoshop Professionals. And here's your hosts, the Photoshop guys, Scott Kelby, Dave Cross, and Matt Kloskowski.
Hi, and welcome to the Matt and Dave Show, formerly known as Photoshop TV. No, actually, still is Photoshop TV.
We fired Scott.
With the Photoshop guys, but as you can see, there's only two of us here today. That's because Scott Kelby is out in California at the George Lepp Institute taking part in the George Lepp Invitational. Now, he has promised us that he's going to make every effort to film some special video report and somehow magically get it to us in time for this show. So that remains to be seen. Yeah. So right now we'll say, coming up later, maybe a report from Scott, but we're not quite sure about how that's going to go. But we shall see. But it's still the Photoshop TV show, just with myself, Dave Cross, and Matt Kloskowski.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to thank all of our listeners, or I guess viewers, because it's TV audience. But wanted to thank everybody for pushing us up to #1 in iTunes.
Very excited about
As of recently, we are number
one.
one.
When we filmed this show, we were number one.
We were number one in iTunes.
We've seen what happens after the two of us get finished.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. We really do appreciate it. Also, I wanted to thank our sponsors. Last week, we got our first sponsor. You didn't see any gratuitous plugs for iStock Photo last week.
Just a few mentions.
No, there's no mugs or hats this week. But I wanted to thank iStock Photo for our sponsor. And believe it or not, we got another sponsor.
Hard to believe.
So thank you to Wacom Pen Digital Tablets. They are our new sponsor. And just wanted to thank them. Also, a quick mention about sponsors. I frequent the web forums and the comments that we get about this TV show, just wanting to know how everybody feels about it. And I do see a few comments here and there about the sponsors and the commercials. And just to let you guys know, we have to do that. The downloads for this show is enormous. If you can imagine the bandwidth to download this show. So we have to use these sponsors to help us pay for the show.
Yes,
so
otherwise
that's
it
where
just
it comes
wouldn't
from.
exist. So we thank them, and we thank you for putting up for a little teeny. Hey, it's a lot less than when you're watching a sitcom and you have to sit through like 15 commercials. This is just
I just fast forward.
a little bit. Yeah, well, that's true. Okay.
So anyway, thank you to everybody, and let's go ahead and get right to the contest, Dave.
Yes, last week we had a contest with people. We asked people to send in their entry, and the question one was, what was Adobe named after? And the answer is a creek, not a brick or my Uncle Frank Adobe. Those were not the correct answer, and we're going to now draw the prize winner from the actual prize itself, because you may recall, if you saw last week's show, the prize was this lovely camera bag / computer bag with room for everything, and we even threw in a DVD into the prize package. So it's the bag and a DVD.
We're actually going to draw the winner right from the bag.
This will be our prize
So
package.
Got a bunch of names in here.
Winner.
We actually got over 350 responses to that contest.
Most of which were actually had the correct answer, I understand, which is always encouraging.
Yeah.
So drum roll or something?
No drum roll.
No drum roll, okay.
All right, so the winner is a DVD. The Scott Kelby one. No, Scott Kelby didn't win. Okay, back in here. And I'll reach in. Want to give it a read, Dave?
I will try. Jeff Bell from Jeff Bell Photo in Arlington, VA. I don't know what that means. Oh, Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, the Canadian, we don't have a state called, well, we don't have states in Canada, we have provinces, so VA means nothing to me.
Hey,
but congratulations, Jeff, for winning that. Well, that will be, now here's the deal. The prize is free, but you have to pay the $48 in shipping it's going to take to get that bag out to Virginia. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that, but that will be on its way. And we're also going to have, we don't announce these, but 10 people win a T-shirt, right, for entering this contest as well. So those will be on the way to those 10 lucky people as well.
Yes. You know, speaking of Canada and its lack of states and whatnot, just wanted to let Dave know that we have a special guest today. Now, you saw this guest last week, and I thought you might have thought that was the last time you were going to see her, but you're not. You're going to see Stephanie Cross once again, because today is a special day. Dave's birthday.
Look at that. Oh,
happy birthday,
Dave.
Dave.
Thank you so much. And do I blow out the flag now, or just
blow out the flag,
stand
please?
at attention while it's being played? So thank you so much.
Happy birthday, Dave. Give Dad a kiss.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. That's so nice. 29 today again for the 15th time. How unbelievable is that?
It's amazing. You're only, what, 8 years older than your daughter.
Shh, stop that. Okay, moving on. Thank you so much, but So, at this point, I think probably the best thing to do is what? Are we going to talk about some news, perhaps?
Let's talk about some news.
Let's go to some news. Okay, we have a couple of things to talk to you about in the news today. The first thing I want to mention is this book, which is the Photoshop Lab Color Book. Now, I'm not going to mention the rest of the subtitle because it's a very long one, but it's by Dan Margolis, and it's a very popular book. Anyone who's read it is finding it just introducing some really cool stuff about the use of LAB color. And I first called it Lab, but I know Dan prefers that it's pronounced LAB. So later on, actually, in our little tutorial section, Matt will be doing a little tip or a little technique based on this book. So if you're interested in the world of color, a great book to learn a lot more about where LAB fits into the world. It's very, very cool. Matt?
I've got some news from Microsoft. Microsoft released the Color Control Palette this week, or Color Control Applet, they call it. But essentially what it is it's a color control plugin for Microsoft Windows. And if you use Windows and you're big on color management and color calibration, this is a very, very large announcement for you because essentially it takes care of your color calibration and your color management on Windows. So you'll want to check the website, which is, by the way, www.photoshoptv.com. That's where we're going to post all the links from today's show on. Now,
is this a free applet that they can?
It's a free applet. Awesome. It's kind of if you're a Windows user, you're probably familiar with Microsoft Power Toys. Well, this is similar. They're not calling it a Power Toy now. They're actually calling it kind of a little plug-in right to Windows. But Microsoft has created it. It's Microsoft certified. Everything cool. Microsoft. So
awesome.
Good for your color
Sounds very interesting. Well, here's another very interesting announcement. Wacom has just announced, literally in the last couple of days, this brand new tablet. It's the first ever wide format tablet. It's really designed for people who either use multiple monitors or have those nice big screen monitors like the Apple Cinema displays and want to have a tablet that's in the same aspect ratio of your monitor.
Or if you have 4 desks.
Or if you just have a lot of space on your hands or you make very broad movements. So we will be using this tablet in some of our demonstrations.
As big as the screen.
Coming up later, we'll have a special announcement in regards to said tablet, so stay tuned for that.
I'm Jack Davis, and you're watching Photoshop TV.
All right, well, that's it for our news this week. Let's go ahead and get right to our very first tip. Essentially, what I'm going to show you in the first tip here is we're going to take a look at a way that you can fade a filter or change the effect that you've applied with a filter. So let's say you've got a photo open, or an iStock photo. Now this could be any photo that you have. Let's say you run a filter on it. For example, I'm going to run a sharpening filter on this photo here. So I'm just going to choose Filter, Sharpen, and I'll run the Unsharp Mask filter on this one. Now we can move our little preview over here, and that's obviously way sharpened too much, but let's just say that we apply a little bit of sharpening to this. Maybe we even go a little bit more than we actually wanted to for the effect, and then we'll click OK. Well, it applies a sharpening effect to your photo, but now let's say you want to reduce that sharpening effect. Well, as soon as you apply the filter, and this works for any filter in Photoshop, go into the Edit menu, and you'll see an option for Fade, and it'll say the filter name that you just applied. So just click that option here, and now you can fade it. 100% means I have the full effect of the filter. If I start to drop this down, I'll start just applying part of the filter that I just ran. When you're done, just click on OK, and now you've essentially just faded the effect that you just added with a filter. All right, back to you, Dave.
All right, that's a great tip, Matt. Thank you. And just to build on that, it's not just filters. Of course, you can do that for things like levels and curves, or even if you paint with a paintbrush or the clone stamp tool and you don't like it, just use that fade command.
All kinds of stuff.
All kinds of, and it even has a blend mode in there, so you can play with the blend mode. So very useful, often overlooked, I would say. A lot of people don't recognize that. So now I would like to share with you a quick little tutorial on a way you can create a nice burnt-in edge effect on your photo in a way that's very flexible. Because you know me, I like to do things in the flexible way.
Dave is
so you
flexible.
can then use it on other photos. So let's take a look at a little tutorial to do that. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Now let me show you one way to do this would be to simply say that you want to make a new layer, and then we're going to fill that layer with black. Make a selection. This is the old way. This is not the flexible way. This is the other way you could do it, which still works, but has one little minor drawback. So I'm just going to make a selection and then feather that a whole lot, like 50, and then hit delete. Now you see I have that nice burned-in edge effect. Very cool, but the problem is not terribly flexible. So here's an alternate way to do it, and it's going to look really weird at first, because of the way I'm doing this, but stick with it because it actually works very nicely and it's very flexible. So what we're going to do is basically try to use levels. I added a levels adjustment layer. Oops, wrong way. I got to move this way. I got to make everything basically look black. Now, sometimes you can do it just with these 3 sliders. Sometimes you'll have to introduce the output slider as well. But one way or another, you get it to look completely black, which is roughly the equivalent of filling with black, but with one slight difference. Now we have this layer mask, and we take a similar approach, but here's what we do. We make our selection. I'm going to, once again, feather this, but I'm going to fill it with black as opposed to deleting, because the way the layer mask works. So if I fill that with black, now you see I get the same effect, but here's the difference. Now, if you decide you don't really want black, you could start playing around with these sliders to get different effects, like different shades of the same color, perhaps. And the other nice thing about this technique is if you do it correctly, you can basically take this same adjustment layer and just drag it on another photo, and you have instant burnt-in effect on the other photo. So there you have it, a very simple way to create a burnt-in effect that's very usable in other images.
And flexible, Dave.
And flexible, because that is very important. All right, so there you have it, a quick little tutorial, but again, one you can use all the time in different documents. And
flexible.
Flexible, right. Now, right before we go to commercial, it's time for this week's little trivia question. Now, just to clarify once again, this is not the send in your response to the trivia and win a fabulous prize. This is just the, for our amusement purposes only, trivia, because we just like to do that, just for amuse ourselves, if nothing else, even if you're not amused. So today's trivia question is, in Photoshop 5, now we're going back a little bit in Photoshop history. Back in Photoshop 5 was the first time they introduced the great big eye that you saw in the Adobe splash screen. And the question is, whose eye was that? And it wasn't just like Joe Schmednick. It's a recognizable name if you know about Photoshop. And here's a hint, he's in the Photoshop Hall of Fame. So we'll have the answer to that trivia question right after this.
Are you a creative professional? If you are, you can't afford to miss a single issue of Layers magazine, the how-to magazine for everything Adobe. Layers gives you amazing tutorials, tips, and tricks that help you master Photoshop, InDesign, Flash, and the entire Creative Suite. We also give you enough creative inspiration to turn your next project into a masterpiece. Available on newsstands nationwide, and visit us online at layersmagazine.com. Save over 50% off the cover price when you subscribe online.
All right, welcome back. And the answer to that trivia question, I know you're just dying to know
Dave
the answer.
Cross.
Because
It's
you'll
Dave.
be asking that one at cocktail
I
parties.
recognize it.
No, it wasn't me. The answer is Mark Hamburg. And I'm sure many of you guessed Russell Brown, right? But it wasn't. It was Mark Hamburg, who was one of the original engineers behind Adobe, the eye in Photoshop 5,
I did not know
and
that.
a member of the Photoshop Hall of Fame. And by the way, just as an aside, if you're interested in the Hall of Fame, it's some website. I think it's like PhotoshopHallOfFame.com.
It is.
Probably you can check out all the people that have won Photoshop Hall of Fame awards over the last few years. Now, I would like to throw out a little tip, if I might.
You might.
Might I do that?
You might.
Well, here's a little tip for you when you're working with the brush tool. So let's take a look, shall we? All right, this little tip is for when you're working with the brush tool. Now, part of this you may already know, and that is when you want to change the opacity, rather than going up to the options bar to change, you can just press the number you want to use, like 5 for 50 or 8 for 80. If you want kind of a weird number for some reason, like 37, you have to go press 37, because if you do it too slow, it'll be 3070. Anyway, that's not really the tip. The tip is this. Here's a little option that's built into the options bar for the paintbrush, which is the airbrush option. Now, here's the thing. When it's turned on, if you try and press like 5 for 50, it's actually changing the flow, not the opacity. And that's a bit of a problem. So the workaround is this. You add in the Shift key. So if you still want to change the opacity, you press, for example, Shift 8, and that will change the opacity to 80. And if you then press 8, it will change the flow to 80. So you can still change it on the fly. Now, the other side of this is you may just decide you don't really want the airbrush turned on at all. So you press Alt-Shift-P, which of course will be Option-Shift-P on the Macintosh, and that will toggle on and off that airbrush option. So there you go. As you're working with the brush, you can just change on the fly opacity, flow, and turn on and off the airbrush options just like that. There you go. A little tip you can use just about every day. Well, certainly every day when you're using the brush tool.
The airbrush.
Now, earlier we mentioned the LAB book. Not the lab color
The
book
lab.
with the LAB book, and now Matt is going to share a tutorial, a tip. Is it a tip or a tutorial? It's kind of both.
It's going to be a tutorial.
A tutorial. He's
Yeah.
going to do a tutorial based on something that Dan wrote in his book. So let's see that now, shall we?
And you might wonder how we seem to switch places all the time. I don't have a laptop here, so you're going to magically see me appear there next time.
It's
just
all
in
the
a
magic
flash.
of post-production.
Yes. Okay, so now I'm back over here on this side, or there, or one of these sides. So I'm not quite sure which one. But as Dave mentioned, I'm going to show you a tutorial that comes from Dan Margulis's LAB color book. And one of the things that you'll notice here is I've got a photo open inside Photoshop, and it has rocks in it. Well, this is a shot I took in Bar Harbor, Maine a few weeks ago. And from the title of Dan's book, he talks about the canyon conundrum. Well, one of the things about that title is a lot of these tips and tutorials that he's got in there, although it's good for overall color, it really works great when you have shots with rocks in them or canyons. So that's what we're using here. And what I'm going to do is I've got the photo in RGB mode. I'm going to go to Image Mode, and I'm going to change over to LAB color. Now you're not really going to see a change happen here, but now we're going to go into curves. So I'm going to press Control-M. That takes me into curves, and if you watched last week, you saw that I set up my curves shortcut to go right to an adjustment layer. And what we're going to do here is, under channel, I'm going to go down to the A channel. Now I want to move this top right point on the curve. I want to move it over 3 grid squares. You might not see these 3 grid squares as I have them. To get it this way, just hold down the Alt key, Option on the Mac, and just click inside that area, and that gives you the smaller grid. So once we've got the small grid, just move this to the left, 3 grid squares, and now we have a purple photo, and that's the tutorial. Now, and then move the bottom one over to the right, 3 squares as well. So move each one over 3 squares, then go down to your B channel and do the same thing. Just move each one over 3 squares. Now watch this. When you're done, click on OK. Now, you might not see the difference, but watch when I show you the before. I'm going to hide the adjustment layer. That's before, that's after. Now, that's a great adjustment. It's all in LAB color. You can't do that in RGB color. So it's a great adjustment. It really brings out the color that was actually in the scene when I took the shot. If you think it looks a little bit too red, sometimes it does, just drop the opacity down a little bit, maybe 80, 70 or 80% around there, and that brings out a nice amount of color into the photo.
I got to agree, that is a cool tip I've used. As soon as I read Dan's book, I tried that. It was like, on a lot of pictures, it really does make a huge difference. So thanks, Dan, Matt, Dan, well, whoever did. I mean, he showed it to you, but it is from Dan's book.
You can call me Matt.
Very cool. So now, it's time for this week's contest for a wonderful prize. But before we do that, we'd like to have Matt review the rules before we even tell you what the prize is or the question is. The rules.
Thank you, Dave. The rules are very, very simple. 1 email per person to photoshoptv@photoshopuser.com. That's it.
PhotoshopTV@Photoshop.
Email your answer only. I briefly get to, I don't even skim the emails really, so sometimes I do skim them. I see some questions in there. Unfortunately, we get like 350 of these, so I can't answer the questions.
Contest entries, not
contest entries only, please.
anything else. If you have any comments about the show, please go to photoshoptv.com and you'll find a wonderful place to add your comments there, and we really do listen to those comments.
Yes, definitely.
So, now, the prize. Now, earlier on, we announced the fact that there was this brand new tablet. Well, thanks to our friends at Wacom, someone is going to actually win one of these, brand new. These are literally so new. These are the only
Can I
two
buy one
in
of those
the
now?
world. You probably can.
Can
I
I?
don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, you can order them. But one of our lucky listeners, viewers, contest entry people will be winning this awesome tablet. And what we're going to do is in a moment we're going to bring up a visual on the screen of a dialog box in Photoshop. And you have to figure out, first of all, of course, this is not part of the answer because you just have to determine what dialog box it is. But at the bottom, you'll see an area where something is missing. And you have to fill in the missing piece. So we'll bring up that visual for you now. And see at the bottom here where there's a little checkbox without anything beside it. That is what you have to fill in the blank and say, what is missing from right there, right there.
Right down here.
So mail your answer to PhotoshopTV@photoshopuser.com, and you might be the winner of this fabulous tablet or one of our 10 t-shirt winners. So make sure you mail in your contest entry.
All right, so thanks, Dave. And what we're going to do this week is I'm going to show you a tutorial that kind of relates to the prize that we're giving away. So since we're giving away a Wacom tablet, why not show everybody one of the features inside Photoshop that you can actually use with the Wacom tablet. All right, so I've got a photo here. And if you take a look at the photo, it's a little bit underexposed in the foreground area. So a lot of the grass and the canyon areas are way underexposed. The clouds look pretty good. What we're going to do is add a levels adjustment layer, and we're going to lighten this up a bit. So I'm going to take the white slider on the right, and I'm just going to move this over, and I'm going to totally blow out the sky. The sky's going to be gone here, but what you'll see is it actually does a pretty good job on the canyon and the grass in front of it. So we're going to move that, totally blow out the sky. We'll click OK. Well, now I'm going to grab the pen and tablet. And essentially what I'm going to do here is, if you notice, the levels adjustment layer added a layer mask. What I can do is start painting in the layer mask and start painting part of the layer that's below it. So I'm just going to go pick the brush tool here. And I'm going to choose a pretty large, it's a 500 pixel soft edge brush. And make sure black is your foreground color. And then just start painting on top of that layer mask. And you'll start bringing in the sky that was in the background here. So you can see I'm bringing in the sky. And I'm going to use the left bracket key, and I'm going to just knock that brush size down, and we'll start bringing in the sky a little bit more. Let's bring the opacity of the brush all the way up to 100%. And as I'm bringing in the sky, you can see with the pen and the tablet, if I press softer, well, I don't get as much of an effect. And if I press hard, well, it starts to spread out that brush a little bit. So over here, I'm going to press really soft, and you can barely see the changes that I'm doing. Now I'm going to press pretty firmly over here, and you can see that it brings back a lot more of the sky. So we'll do that across the entire sky here. Bring back all the areas we like. And as you get closer to the canyon, you can just use that left bracket key, decrease your brush size, and really try to get in there. And that's where the pen and the tablet comes in handy too, because then it allows me to get a lot more fine-tuned control. So as you can see, I got into the canyon here. The way to get around that, just flip your foreground and background colors, press the X key. That changes your foreground color to white, and now I can just start painting in any areas that I went in there. So it just makes it a lot easier to do adjustments like this when you're using the pen and the tablet.
All right, thanks, Matt. One thing I did want to mention about that tutorial was a very good one, but the latest tablets, you're welcome, have these express keys on the side. You could actually, if you wanted to, set those up to do things like change the size of the brush, or even I have mine set up to switch between foreground and background color. So as I'm working, I'm going to have to really be on the toolbox. I can just press a key to switch back and forth.
I thought of that. This tablet's so wide, my arms weren't long enough to actually go both ways.
That's actually an advantage, having a big tablet. Yeah. But all right, as we mentioned earlier, Scott is in California at the George Lepp Institute, and he promised us he would film a little report, so here's Scott.
All right, here it's only our third show, and we're already doing a live on location thing. Okay, well, it's live when I'm shooting it, but when you watch it, it may not be live, but it doesn't matter. Here's the thing. We are out in Los Osos, California, and I'm at the Lepp Institute of Digital Imaging for the George Lepp Invitational. Let me just tell you really quick what this is, because we are at an absolute state of the art. In fact, this is the best classroom and setup I've seen for a photography workshop and a digital imaging workshop ever. This place is unbelievable. Anyway, so here's what George Lepp does, and if you don't know who George Lepp is, you probably don't have a camera. But if you do, anyway, he's a legendary photographer, a Canon Explorer of light, big super genius guy. Anyway, he's put this whole thing together. But what he's done this week is he's invited all these photographers and Photoshop people together. And for the next 3 days, we all teach each other Photoshop and photography. So that's why I'm here. And there's other people here like Ben Wilmore and Katrine Eisman and Jack Davis. And in fact, today we have a special guest here. We're going to have Ben Wilmore share some of his tips. I've got a tip. Ben's got a tip. So let's find Ben. Where's Ben? Ben's back there sitting. If you look way back in the back, there's Ben. Ben, wave. Oh, hey. There he is. Usually we like to have the guests right up front with us, but today we like to have them sitting at individual workstations. Anyway, we're going to bring Ben on, and Ben's going to show you his Photoshop tip for this week.
Okay, in this tip I'd like to show you how to get two areas of color to match, and then how to create a nice transition between the two. And for this I'm going to end up using curves, and so I'm going to come in here, and with curves there's a few tips you can get. The first one is if I want to change an area of my image, I need Photoshop to add dots to this curve so that it indicates how much red, green, and blue is in an area. To do that, you hold down the Command key if you're on a Mac, that's Control in Windows, and also hold down Shift at the same time. If you have both of those keys held down, when you click the mouse button, it doesn't look like anything happens in curves, but if you come up here and click and go to the individual red, green, and blue curves, you'll find there'll be a dot on each one of the three curves. Then if you want to change the area that you've just clicked on to match another area of your photograph, when you're working on the individual curves of red, green, and blue, move to that other portion you want to match and click on it. At the bottom of the curves dialog box, you'll find the two numbers that show up down there will indicate the exact amount of color that's needed in there. So in this instance, I'm clicking and I see 198. That's the amount of red that's in this portion of the photo. And all I need to do is come down there and type it in for the output value. Then I can switch over to green and do the same thing. Click on the area of skin that I want. I see the number at the bottom, 141, and that's what I'll type in. And then I'll go to blue and do the same thing. 113. And now this area of skin out here where I originally clicked should be about approximately the same color as the internal area. If I click on OK, the problem is if you make this extreme of an adjustment, the transition between the area that you've changed and the area that you've left alone will always have a very obvious transition.
Ben, it's not that obvious.
You don't think so? Well, my quality standards are a little different than that, so let's try to fix it. I'm going to use the healing brush for this. And with the healing brush, I look for an area of good texture where just you have skin tone in there. And I'll hold down the Option key, Alt and Windows, and click. And then go right on top of that transition, making sure my brush is wide enough to cover the whole thing. And I'll click and drag across it. And it's going to blend in with what's on both sides of this area that I painted on, so when I let go, we're going to have a much less obvious transition. But I will probably need to paint across it more than one time to get it to look really smooth. And here I'm using an extreme example to let you know how extreme of a job you could work on. It will look 1,000 times better on a normal image where you're doing more of a subtle change. But if you compare this to what we had before I did my healing, here's the original transition, here's the end result. And so the tip was how to match color in two areas and also how to try to help the transition.
All right, thanks to my special guest, Ben Wilmore, for tipping us out today. And if you want to find out more about Ben, go to Ben's blog. Ben's got a really cool Photoshop blog called whereisben.com. Now, it's stupid to ask yourself that today because we know where Ben is. Ben is, well, he's right here in Los Osos, California. But if tomorrow you want to know where is Ben, go to whereisben.com. All right, now Ben's not the only one who brought tips today. I brought a tip myself. It's a tip on the bridge that my buddy Terry taught me. All right, here's the tip that my buddy Terry White came up with. Terry works at Adobe. He came up with this great workaround for fixing something that's kind of frustrating if you're the kind of person, and I know that you are, that rates your images full screen. And by rating, I mean these little star ratings. See how you can add a little star here? Let me zoom in. So you can add the stars there to your files. Right. So let's say that you're rating them full screen, which is a great way to look at your images. So you just press Command L or in PC Control L to bring up the slideshow. Now this is the slideshow. It's normally full screen, but I've got it just floating in a window here so you can see it. And as your photos come up, you can just press the numbers 1 through 5 on your keyboard to rate your images, right? So if it's a good image, you might rate it a 4 or 5. If you want to delete it, you might rate it a 1 star. But here's the problem. Once you get back to the bridge and you go to filter your images, your results, if you go to choose show 1 star, it won't show just your 1 star images. That's because, look, I'll zoom in here so you can see, it shows 1 star or more. So it won't just show your 1 star images. How do you show and get rid of and delete just your 1 star images? Well, that's Terry's cool trick. Here's what you do. Go into the edit menu and choose find. Okay, when the find dialog box comes up, under criteria, you're going to change it from file name to rating. Here, let me zoom in so you can see that really good. So for criteria, you're going to choose rating, and your criteria is your rating is equal to, and then you're going to switch it to 1 star. So now when you click find, it's going to find any files that are rated 1 star. And also make sure that this checkbox is on to show the find results in a new browser window. That way when you click OK, a new window shows up with all of the images that you've rated just 1 star, and to delete all the bad ones, select all and just hit delete on your keyboard. I'm not going to hit delete right now because I don't want to delete all these photos, but that's what you would do. Just hit delete and those photos are gone. So there's Terry's great tip for quickly finding and deleting all the images that you want after you've been reviewing your images in full screen mode. So that's it, our first on-location news piece featuring tips from Ben Wilmore and myself. Well, that's it from here in Los Osos. I always have a hard time saying that. Los Osos, California, here at the LEP Institute of Digital Imaging. If you want to find out more about the LEP Institute, and I tell you, check it out, it's the coolest thing, go to lephoto.com or just go to the Photoshop TV website and click on the link because we put all the links from the show, as you know, right there. Well, back to Dave and Matt. See you guys in the studio.
All right, well, that basically winds us up for this week. Now, just a few reminders before we go, and that is don't forget to enter the contest. Check out photoshoptv.com, one entry, for all the links we've mentioned. You don't have to worry about writing anything down. And we'd also like just to remind one other thing, and that is that a couple of weeks ago we announced the Digital Canvas Awards, which is the first ever worldwide Photoshop contest. And the entries are now open. And you have until the end of December to enter. So go to digitalcanvasawards.com
to
find out. Yeah, and the first prize is a trip to Paris, France to do a cover for Photoshop User magazine. So check that out as well. So thank you, Matt, for joining me on the Matt and Dave show this week.
Thank you.
And next
Thanks,
week
everybody.
We'll be back to the regular Photoshop guys, hopefully, although who knows with our travels who might be here and who might not. But someone will be here doing Photoshop TV just for you. We'll see you next time.